Welcome back to another template design video, and in this one we're going to look at the long, principally only as a par 5. It's going to be a rather shorter tutorial. I have done long par 5 and long par 4 tutorials before, so most of those guidelines still apply, but we're going to look at it from a template point of view. Now, for the purposes of this video, a long hole should be the longest on your course, and it's typically a par 5, but can be a par 4 as well. Basically, it's one where more often than not you'll reach with 3 shots rather than 2. Doesn't mean you shouldn't be able to reach it in 2. You can do occasionally very downwind or with the right club set, but the aim should be principally to get on in 3. So we're going to take a look at this principally through template holes, and yeah, see how this is a useful hole for you to include in your designs. This whole idea was formed principally of I wanted to use a diagonal great hazard because I've had this idea bubbling around for a while, and it's every time I've tried to use it I've never quite got it right until this hole, which I felt I finally cracked it. I'm not saying it's perfect, but I think it works the way that I really wanted it to. So first of all, off the tee you had a decision as to whether you wanted to go right. If you could speed through that little slot you can end up just about here. The bunker at 320 is more a rolling hazard, as I would term them. Basically you'd land short and you'd go into it. It plays larger than you would expect because of the sloping around it. If you're landing anywhere here you're risking going into it. So you really had to hit this tiny slot and decide whether you wanted to take on that 10-yard gap. If so, you're left with a favourable look on your second shot. Or if you bailed out this way, then the land actually moves you further down and this way. So although it may look like it's going uphill, it's kind of also funneling forward, and this was just a nightmare to sculpt. And you could end up here was your alternate option, so either there or there. Now from this side, what you're left with is 230 down to here, but 50 feet downhill. 268 you're not reaching. 250, 48 downhill you might just about reach with a 3-wood, but it's really touch and go. So basically, if you went over left and kind of didn't accept the challenge off the tee, even with the longest driver, you're really struggling to get to carry that great hazard here unless you've got the wind with you. Whereas if you made it to this side, let's say at 330, well, 238 and 44 down, you probably are managing to carry that with 3-woods that go 248 or so. So you are ending up there, and you're possibly able to carry to this bit. And the amount of editing this took on fairways and splines and elevation and sculpting and that was crazy. But what are the rewards that you get if you go from there? Well, if you go to this side, you've got some more room to run out, but you're leaving a pitch down the green, so it can be a really good place to lay up for this pin or for this one where you've got a little bit of a backstop. For this one though, you'd be short-siding yourself. For this pin, actually you're coming in over there and towards this runoff where you probably want to be over this side. So you had from the right hand side, if you managed to take on that tee shot and succeeded, you then have the options based on the pins that you can see and working out where you're going. If you went on the left hand side, okay, you may not be able to cross here, or if you went to the right hand side but you didn't really fancy taking on that big great hazard, you've then got options of this kind of little bunker cutting in here. Well, you've still got the same option of left or right, but taken back a step, so you can go to here, or you've got more space down here, and this was always the really safe area. You could always lay up to, it opened up the green, but for certain pins, this one, that would be a horrible shot to have to leave yourself 120 yards to a tiny sliver of green, whereas if you look at the change in angle, if you go to here, you've got a sizable advantage if you're playing out this way. So what this great hazard really allowed me to do was basically divide the fairway into 4 sections, so 1, 2, 3 and 4, and say you've got multiple ways in which to get there. You've got camber that's taking you down this part, so if you wanted to hit a 3-wood and just trundle it down there you could do, if you'd hit the bunker say. You've got a little bunker protecting this slightly higher side, which was more advantageous for certain pins. But by adding and basically taking away all of this area of fairway and saying that's unplayable, it allows you to really exaggerate the options that you give the player. The green shape then really worked in tandem, wide and shallow. So going really wide but really shallow allows you to basically make the most of playing either to one side or another. And this is the sort of green that when you look at it, that's not designed to accept a 3-wood shot. It's not there for that. That is very much a green that's designed for a wedge shot, and I think that's a key principle of this hole as well. So the second here at Springbrook Country Club is the long here, and what Joe is better than probably anyone else at doing is creating longs that are sub 600 yards, and here you've got 598, but how he's done it is basically by saying there's no way of running the ball onto the green. You've got the front bunker, and then you've got a green that features loads of internal contours and is clearly suited again to receive a wedge shot rather than a 3-wood, and that's a really good way of doing this. In terms of the tee shot, you've got basically a little bit of camber, so flat this side, challenging you to take on those bunkers. The angle is subtle, but you are hitting across the fairway, and as you'll see, it drops down a little bit this way, so you have to be favouring the left hand side of the fairway if you're trying to hit a driver. You also have a bunker just very cleverly placed here that you might run out into, so you have to be very careful and really favour the left hand side of the fairway with the drive. So we'll hit a shot and hopefully find the fairway. Felt awful that drive, but we might just about get away with it. But you can see that if we hit that properly, that bunker's very much in play. Now 292 left in, we're definitely not making that, but even had I only had 260 or so, it's never a green that you're going to go at into. So the question then becomes, where are you laying up? And that's where you've got this really well placed bunker here. So if you're covering it, you don't want to hit a 3-wood because that's running into that bunker at the end. You want to be hitting a 5-wood, and then that's just potentially going a little bit too long. And also, what shot are you leaving in? Well, probably a pitch or a flop shot, which to that pin's going to be awkward to manage. You kind of want a full shot in, or at least you don't necessarily want one. I feel I want one, and therefore that's my choice. Oops, not the camera angles I was looking for. So if I want to leave a full shot, well, am I taking on the narrow part of the fairway this side, or am I laying up a little bit further? I think today I'm probably laying up a little bit further, and we're going for, ludicrous though it might sound, I'm going to hit a 7-iron, or a 6 might just creep into the bunker. We're going to play a 6-iron and we're going to go out that way. Tiny little bit of camber, so we're going to go this. So you're always thinking about where you're going to play with this shot, and then what I've left myself is hitting it over a false front and to a tiny pin on a little tier that then runs away as well. The green really is everything on this hole. So we're going to try and loft up just a little. Finally hit a perfect, and maybe we've stuck it close. Even then it's just gone on a tiny little bit. But you can see from this hole and how it's designed, every single shot you're having to think on, and that really is the goal with the long as to what you're aiming to make the player do. But it really all starts with the green. Start with the green complex as you saw on Strathlorne and work your way back from that. Back once more to Raynor Ridge, and the 14th is our long. As you can see by the distance and the fact that it's slightly uphill, 603 yards means we're probably looking at a 3-shotter, although I think you can get there in 2. There's this front bunker that means it's basically all carry to the green, unless you're getting, and there's a hint of a redan slope here as well, so you could potentially chase it on here and run it all the way down, which is an interesting twist on how you might get around it. But in terms of how's Joe used the long templates to its maximum, well, first of all, you do have, I believe, out of bounds if you are way left, so if you're chasing this, and that plays larger than it looks because the ground does gently roll this way, so you could end up out of bounds if you're not careful. Secondly, he's really tightened the landing zone with 2 diagonal bunkers, which means with the wind being where it is, we're having to think about, well, how long is it going to carry, and can I clear this bunker into that wind, etc. What I like about these sorts of holes is thinking, well, if I do carry this, where will I be able to reach? And that's where the bunkering up near the green gets really interesting. So if we fly up to the green now and look at where we could end up, I'm just going to hop into this view. With the pins there, we probably want to, you've got a question as to whether you want to be coming from this side or this side. If you come in this side, you're going down the slope, so maybe, maybe not. This side, you've got less green to work with, and you're potentially going long. You want to think about that as well. And then, well, where's your layup coming from? And these different bunkers at different depths and angles make that a really tricky decision. Do you want to lay way back, in which case you've got a full wedge in? He's given you room to do that, but one bunker that you want to be careful of in order to do that. Do you want to be going for as close to the green as possible and just taking the pitch or the splash shot? In which case you're going left or right, and those landing zones are really tight. You're also having to bear in mind elevation change as well, and those green slopes too. So, as ever, I think the key with a long par 5 or a 3-shot par 5, if that's what you're using your long for, is to make that second shot interesting. Don't have it just be an auto layup, don't have it just be a hit as far as you can down the fairway, and you can't have it being just go straight for the green. A nice way of doing it is to take away the ground option into the front of the green, or make that really tricky, like this bunker here, and then stagger bunkers throughout the landing zones so that you're really thinking about where you want to be laying up. So our final example of a long, and we're at the first at Fairyland on a par 5, and I think I loved the idea for a major competition of starting with a long par 5. It's actually significantly downhill, you get a great view of the mist off the edge of the plot, and the tee shot itself isn't too daunting. It cambers a little bit, but nothing too major. Where this one gets really interesting is up by the green, and as we've discussed in previous ones, this is a green designed to receive a wedge shot. It runs kind of from front to back. There's a big false front, there's an internal spine, there's a runoff here, there's all sorts going on here, which mean you don't want to be out of position, and all the putts that you have on this green are difficult. You can sort of run it on if you're clearing this bunker here, but the diagonal staggered nature of those two bunkers mean that you have to be really careful with where you're landing the ball. And also, the further down the fairway you get, you can see a real high point here and a real low point here. The ball is always running from left to right here, and then the green is kind of doing right to left at points as well. And so heading back to the tee, we'll see how we get on with this one. 11 miles an hour, 12 miles an hour into the face as well. We're going to find this very difficult. So decent drive to start with, we can't do much better, but you can tell just by the distance that's going, we're definitely not making it in 2. So how is the layup shot interesting? Well, first of all, we'd said that the land was all running this way, so we have to be carrying just the corner of this bunker in order not to run into this one. But then you want to think about, is that really the place I want to leave myself? With all of these par 5s, you're thinking about where you want to be coming in at. The more from the left hand side we're coming in to this pin, the more it's running away from us, and you've got this slope. So we really want to be coming in from the right if we possibly can. Now you're starting to think of whether we're going to land in that bunker, particularly with this wind, whether we're going to run out of fairway this side, how far are we leaving. I think I'm probably going to play a 5-wood and hope that the wind keeps it short of that bunker and the land takes it slightly over to the right. And I think that's kind of the safe way to play this one, but we're still on a side slope, so that's tricky. We've got a wedge into the wind, which is always really tough. As you can see, again, Joe designs these sorts of holes really nicely in that there's no easy shot. None of these, even though it might look quite wide open, none of these are straightforward shots, and they're testing different things every single time. And that one I'm now worried about spin. Actually, I think that's a pretty good leave, and even then the putt is really difficult. So it's another good example of how you can use camber and angles and really careful bunker placement to make sure that a long par 5 functions as it should. So that's our long template, and whilst it might seem simple, So that's our long template, and whilst the idea might be simple, as just have a hole that is the longest on the course, there's packed full of strategy with these, and I haven't included two of the very best examples in Old Ainsdale 13 and this one, St Cyrus 11, mainly because I've done detailed summaries of those in the long par 5 video, which I'll link below as well. You could always make your long a par 4, that's completely doable. It's just a little less strategic and a bit more penal because you're expecting the player to reach in 2 rather than giving them options about where they choose to lay up. I hope you found this useful and picked up a few things that you might want to use in your own designs. Do check out this video, the long par 5 video, for a summary of this hole and some others, because I think that will help as well. But until next time, see you later.